administrator for the CompWise Retro program. So looks like we've got a few more attendees signing on here. So I will just go through some logistic things here real quick before we get going. There are a couple of attachments that you'll see in the handout section of your webinar program. One is the actuarial predictive modeling handout, and this one was provided a couple of years ago by the department, and it's kind of a nice visual that helps explain various things about how the early case reserve system came about. And then the other attachment is the early case reserve FAQ, and that is available on the LNI website. So, but I provided it here for you as well if you want to take a look at that at any point throughout this training. So again, want to thank everybody for coming. If you have questions at any point in time throughout the webinar, please feel free to either type them into the questions box that's provided. And I like to do fairly interactive webinars, so please don't hesitate to ask a question. I won't certainly say who is asking, but it's nice. A lot of people probably have your same question. You're also welcome to send me an email after the webinar or give me a call. My number will be at the end, and if you have specific questions after we're done. So I anticipate this webinar will take approximately 30 to 45 minutes. I have not done this one before, so it could take a little bit longer, but I'll try not to be too wordy if at all possible. So I'm going to go ahead and get going. It looks like we've got who we're going to have on here, and I want to be conscientious of everybody's time. So here we go. Okay, so the department has what's called case reserving. A lot of you are probably familiar with it, but if not, we'll go over this briefly to give you a little bit of background. Case reserving is a process in which LNI places reserves on claims. This is an insurance system, and so they want to make sure they can cover the cost of the claim. And the important part about case reserving is it's for the life of the claim. So remember, after it's done with your experience factor or done in the retro, these claims sometimes can go on for years and years at LNI before they finally close them. So they have to make sure they can cover this and keep their fund solvent for the life of all of these claims. So there used to be traditional case reserving up until mid-April of this year. That was the normal process. This is not computer generated, so the case reserving was done by claims managers at LNI. These are level 3 claims managers, so they've generally been around for 3 to 4 years at minimum. The traditional case reserving was not traditionally done until the claim was 9 months old. So from that, and that's from the injury date or the date the department received it. So that was the kind of the old way of doing it. The one thing about traditional case reserving is that it's a subjective analysis. So these are claims managers kind of looking at various surgeries or conditions or what have you, using somewhat of a formula-based system, but a very subjective system. There's a high potential to be inconsistent. We've seen, of course, I came from the department with a little over 14 years. Been out here about a year and a half, and so I've got a lot of experience in my experiences that the human case reserve can be very, very high. So the process is repeated for traditional case reserving, and we'll go into that here in a second, but that is repeated when what are referred to as the buckets are full. So if there's a $10,000 time loss reserve and you're at $9,000, that claim is going to hit a re-reserve. So it'll get picked up on a list and get sent back up to get a re-reserve on it. So that's what are referred to as buckets. So typically case reserving is adverse to retro performance. So the more reserves we have on our claims in the retro groups, the worse the performance is. So we'll talk about that here shortly, but case reserving is not a friend of retro generally. It's part of the business, but we we are very cognizant of what reserves are unclaimed. So early case reserve, this is referred to as ECR. And when you are talking about it with either the department or here with our CareWorks team, and this took effect on 4/18/19. Kind of an interesting note about that is we were notified officially on 4/15/19. So we had 3 days before the department implemented the system. Um, it's an algorithm based using data. This is from the department's FAQ from 1 million claims over 10 years. So that's how they gathered the data, looking at various data points to know, whether it's the age of the worker, the injury type, the risk class, uh, various, if the worker has 2 jobs, and we'll talk about that here later, that will impact how the algorithm will set that claim. So it's not unique to Washington. It's used widely across the United States and Canada. So there is a lot of this algorithm-based reserving that is now sort of becoming the standard model for insurance, industrial insurance. It was tested by L&I here in Washington for 3 years. So they, made it very public that eventually they were going to roll this out. We just didn't think it would happen in 3 days, but okay. So the theory of ECR is that this will benefit employers and retros in the long run. So that's the theory. So how this feels for retro employers. And so most of you are retro employers, so we want to make sure we kind of explain how this is going to feel for you and what's going to seem different. So claims in retro first adjustment that traditionally did not get reserved. So we didn't usually see reserves on those claims that were in the first adjustment until they were 9 months old. Or there was a cost threshold for medical of $20,000. Those claims are now getting reserved in ECR within the first 30 days of being in the department. So where we might have seen maybe an $80,000 reserve at 9 months, we're seeing an $80,000 reserve in the first 30 days. So ECR reserves can change month to month based on different pre-established metrics. So each month ECR is looking at a different set of metrics that it's calculating to determine what it's going to do with the reserve. And so that could change month to month. So ECR, I refer to this as unforgiving. It's to employers that don't have strong return to work programs. They have workers with serious injuries and poor safety programs. So what we're seeing is that the claims that are rolling in that have the really high reserves on them are those employers where we're seeing the department pay time loss benefits. You've got major joint injuries or falls from ladders, hit by cars, things like that. And sometimes that's connected to a poor safety program if your workers aren't being safe on ladders or things like that. So ECR zeroes in on. So this is an interesting slide. It's going to kind of break down on, and I'll have one here in a little bit that it's a little more difficult to read, but it looks at the job of injury. So ECR is going to be a little bit harder, say, on a manufacturing machinist than it would on a retail clerk. So it's going to look at that. It really looks at the age of your workers. So if you've got, an aging workforce, generally don't heal as quick. The claims are a little bit more expensive, so you're going to see that impact your reserve. Serious injuries take a big hit. So if the claim comes in and looks serious, and then after time there's not looking to be surgery, we have seen ECR be a little bit more forgiving in that situation. So another important thing is if your employees have 2 jobs, because you have to always remember that if they get hurt on your job, you have to cover their wages if you're going to keep them on salary for both their jobs. So if they can do your job but they can't do the other job, you have to cover the wages, or the department's going to pay benefit from that. But that's important and oftentimes very confusing for employers. So each month, ECR looks at between 12 and 20 different variables, the biggest cost drivers hospital stays, high wage rates. So the more your employees make, the higher ECR is going to hit you. And if the department pays time loss. So you're going to hear us oftentimes saying, would you be interested in covering, I call it gap kept on salary, where you're paying these little periods of time loss, or kept on salary where you're going to continue their wages while we work on getting them back to light duty. And surgery. Surgeries are going to hit you pretty hard, especially when they go right away in. If they have like an open reduction or something, not a fracture, the ECR is going to come out pretty high. So this is something that was generated by the department, so it's a little bit kind of challenging to read, but this is what the department says ECR is looking at. So the types of claim, example, PPD, which is permanent partial disability, time loss, or medical, so it's looking at what type of claim it is. Incurred cost on the claim at 21 months. So again, it will be looking at that claim all the way until that claim is 21 months old. The eventual duration of time loss, again, this is not the easiest thing to read, but it's basically saying that they're predicting how long this person's going to be on time loss benefits. And it occurs once a month. So generally, the ECR drop from the data warehouse happens between about the 5th and what we're seeing is about the 13th of each month. So that's when the new reserves are going to take effect. So this slide is kind of interesting, but it is basically the department's data points that they're looking at for your ECR. So you'll see in the top left-hand corner, that's at 1 month of the 21 months. So this is what the system is going to be looking at for various things that are involved in the claim. So you'll see at 2 months, 3 months, there's different things. And the reason why it stops at 9 months is because at 9 months, generally the human case reservist is going to take over. So we have, again, this is an L&I generated slide, but I thought it was pretty interesting. So it says this is about the accuracy of ECR. So they're saying their accuracy of predicting fatality claims is 0%. Their accuracy of predicting total partial TPD claims, so basically pension claims, is 0%. So they're not trying to predict that. Their accuracy of predicting PPD claims, so this is the one where you're going to have impairment paid when the claim is closed, is between 59 and 86%. So that's a pretty wide range there. Their accuracy of predicting time loss is 55 to 83. Again, huge range. And their accuracy of predicting medical only, 83 to 97%. So how I read this slide from L&I is that they basically are doing a pretty good job of knowing which ones are medical only, and that they're not as good at predicting which ones are time loss or PPD. And I can verify that. So we've seen 3 months of ECR data roll out, and there's been a lot of fluctuation in those amounts. So we have seen things as, $2,000 claims that came in with the ECR reserve of 290,000. That will the next month or the month after will drop down to that $2,000 claim being a $10,000 reserve. So the department's still got some learning to do on their predictive modeling. So how do you know if a claim is an ECR reserve? So this screen that you're seeing here, it's what it looks like when you go into the Claim and Account Center on L&I. And if you go to claim cost, put your claim number in there and do claim cost, an estimated claim cost there, you'll see in that red, it'll say computer generated. And that's how you will know that this is a ECR reserve versus a human reserve. If it's a human reserve, it will not have that computer generated in red there. So that's how you'll know which system did this reserve for you. Okay, so it's a game changer. Claims that historically could pass through the retro first adjustment are not "quote unquote" safe anymore. And aggressive return to work programs is the key for retro performance. So we got the ECR notification in mid-April, and for 3 of our groups, hospitality, retail, and facilities, your freeze date is the end of this month. So it is this week. We have our freeze date on Friday. So we had to do some scrambling. You might have heard from a few of your examiners. I'm trying to get some light duties through um, quicker because those claims fell into that first adjustment. So those are claims that had injury dates through September 30th of 2018. So, traditionally, those would not have been impacted by a case reserve necessarily unless they hit that $20,000 mark in that first year. So employers that have a culture of workers immediately returning to work are not seeing as big of a negative hit with ECR. So again, employers that have kind of this culture of, bring us back your restrictions, we will accommodate those right out of the gate. We're seeing much lower ECR reserves. So, remember, if the department even pays 1 day of time loss, the system's going to come and set a reserve on it. So your CompWise team, which is my team, has directed additional resources to help employers quickly return workers to light duty and qualify for the state work reimbursement to help offset the cost. So we have 2 new members to our team. You should have received an email here in the last few weeks about our team. And our return to work facilitators are Michaela Reach and Kristen Jagla, and they are specifically working on quick return to work. So we're trying to really cut down that time frame of how long it's taking providers to approve those. They're there to help come up with ideas. So we're really trying to make sure that we're not getting hit too negatively by the ECR system. So here's some questions to ask yourself. Do you have a robust return to work program? If you don't, we can help. We have Tara Withrow on staff. She is our in-house vocational services specialist. She can help you with different ideas on building a robust return to work program. Do you have a strong culture of safety? Do you have a safety committee? There are ways for workers to report hazards, so that's really important. You have a system in place for them to get a notice to you that they've got, maybe a rug that's out of place or a tile's coming up. So those are important things. Our loss prevention staff can either do an on-site visit or they can do a telephone staffing. So those are available to you as well. So do you have a positive culture within your workforce when it comes to injuries and how the company handles them? So, for the most part, I think most of our employers in the retro groups, have, we want to know your injuries. We want to, get you the medical help if you need it. So those are really important things when it comes to getting quick treatment, getting people back to work, and getting those claims closed. And we have a lot of ways we can help you do that. So understanding the ins and outs of ECR. So predictive planning for potentially bad claims. So again, the department's looking at claims for the life of the claim. They're not looking at it necessarily right now, what's going on. So ECR reserves are updated monthly by the system or until a human case reserve looks at it. So once a human case reservist looks at a claim, it will never go back to the ECR system. So that's important. ECR updates happen between the 5th and the 10th of the month. And again, in June, they didn't happen until the 13th. So that the department said the 5th and the 10th, but we have seen a little bit later. ECR does not predict PPD. So that's an interesting thing on the claim. So it will not tell you if there is likely to be a permanent impairment award. So that generally happens at 9 months by the human reserve. So we will generally ask for a human reserve if the group retro freeze date is coming and the claim has a high ECR reserve. So we have done this on approximately, I would say, 20 to 40 claims between the groups, where we have asked for kind of an emergency reserve to be done because the ECR reserve is not catching up with how quickly the employers are moving with light duty. So that will happen. So re-reserves can also backfire. because it's a human reserve, because they are subjective, they can increase the reserves. We have had that happen, and so we're very careful with this, and the examiners will often staff that with myself, and we'll go over the possible negative things that could happen from requesting a re-reserve. So this is a really important side note that I like to bring this up whenever I'm doing a training for employers, because I think it's really important that I don't think employers, for the most part, are aware of what's called the medical only discount, and it's kind of hidden in the Washington Administrative Code. And so I like to take every opportunity I can to make sure that employers are aware of this discount. So I've listed the WAC here that applies to the medical only discount in case you're curious and want to check that out. But employers are eligible for a medical only credit on their experience modification rate, or their EMR, for claims where there is no time loss or PPD paid on the claim or on those claims. And so this is generally, of course, in the first year of the claim. This can help with your ACR reserves, and I'll talk about that here. For 2019, this medical only credit is $3,050. And so what that means is that if the claim is under $3,050 in medical costs, the employer will not be charged to that claim against their experience modification rate or their experience factor when that claim hits your rate. So for injuries that are happening now, they're either going to hit your rates in 2021 or 2022, depending on the date of injury. So some examples that are shown here are a claim closes with no time loss. That's when the department pays those lost wages, or PPD, and it closes under $3,050 in medical. The employer is charged zero. That's really important if you're trying to bring your experience factor down, because if you have a lot of these, and they can add up. So let's say your claim closes with no time loss or PPD, but it's a $10,000 medical claim. That's okay, because the employer is only going to be charged $6,950. You're still given that credit if you don't have time loss or PPD on there. So again, all these add up when you're dealing with these kind of little claims. An interesting statistic that came out of some data that I pulled here recently to prepare for this webinar is that we had 120 claims in 2018 for all of our groups that qualify for this discount and didn't take advantage of it. So that's really important when you're thinking of money that you're leaving on the table, or positive impacts you can make on your experience factor. The parameters I used for this are claims that have come in under $3,050 in medical costs and have department paid time loss benefits between $1,000 and $3,000. So generally, that's kind of the range that I encourage employers to do kept on salary. So it's also important to remember that for your experience modification rate, generally cannot go up more than 25% each year. So I say that generally because there are exceptions to that. But when you're looking at getting your experience modification rate down, you always want to remember it can only go up or down by 25%. But a claim could hit your experience factor 3 different times, and you could get a 25% increase each time that claim is captured, because you get captured on that for 3 years. So if you're taking advantage of this medical only discount, after 3 years, you can qualify for what is called a claim-free discount. So this can get you up to 40% in your savings on your premium each year. But again, to get this claim-free discount is hard to get and even harder to keep. So you want to always make sure that if you have that, or you're working towards getting that you don't lose it. So this is just an example. I took off all the identifying information of an account that we've got in the group, but you can see down here the experience modification rate, and that's why that's important. Everybody comes in as a base rate of 1. So in this example, the employer is kind of creeping up. So that's where those medical only discounts can really help you if you're taking advantage of them. So if you still have questions about ECR, which we're still learning as well, but the FAQ is attached. Again, this is generated by L&I. The PowerPoint can be available to you if you would like a copy of it. You're welcome to reach out to myself, and I will provide that. Your lead examiners that are handling your account. So we have Debbie, Nick, Sarah, and Shelly, and they have had a few months working with ECR, so they can kind of help you understand why your claim is getting hit. So employers are always welcome to call me. You don't have to set up a meeting if are thinking about it and you just want to pick up the phone. I will, if I don't have time at that point, I will always set up another time to call you, but I usually will make the time to help you understand how to improve your performance because it's important to us and the group. Another really cool thing coming is we're working on this. It should be available soon where we're going to have a library, an online library of all of our recorded webinars so you can go in and watch those. It'll have links to upcoming ones. We'll have toolbox talks in there. So if you have safety meetings and you want to have an agenda for that, we're going to have all of this in a centralized location. And I will send out that link as soon as we've got that ready so that you can access that. So that concludes our webinar today. I did pretty good, I think, staying on track with my 30 minutes. So we have kind of popping back here, the next one that we have coming up here on July 23rd, if you have not registered for that. And I think this is going to be a really good one, and it's after the closure. And that's talking about protest appeals, board hearings. We'll talk about sidebar agreements, how to litigate a claim, when to hire an attorney, basically just how to avoid the nightmare. And then we have another one in August on how to increase your refunds and lower your premiums. So again, sort of the same idea of what we did today, but just diving a little bit further into that. So again, I want to thank everybody for joining us here today or joining me and for taking the time out of your day. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. And thank you so much for being part of the CompWise Retro program.